The words "lest we forget" are chiselled into our nation's consciousness. They're important because not only do they serve as a tribute to our fallen, they serve as a reminder to today's leaders that there is a very real cost of war, and where possible, we must strive to avoid conflict on such an unimaginable scale happening again. In his role as the most senior American official here in Australia, Acting US Ambassador and Chargé d'Affaires Mike Goldman attended the national service in Canberra.
Those who have served our nation have bequeathed to us a great legacy. May we, and the generations that come, prove worthy of their sacrifice.
You were at the memorial for Anzac Day for those services. As an ally, how do you reflect on the importance of Anzac Day and how it resonates in this country and across the ditch?
Well, I'm deeply impressed. I've been at Anzac Day, the Dawn commemorations, both here in Australia, but also in Commonwealth countries. You know, my last posting was in Fiji, and they have a smaller scale but equally moving, reverent dawn ceremony in Fiji, and that's really touching. It reminds us both of the costs of war and the importance of sharing common ground and standing shoulder to shoulder. So I find it incredibly poignant. It also gives me great confidence when I see young people, young school kids participating in the commemorations, that ANZUS will be vital and consequential for generations to come in addition.
How significant is it that we have fought side by side in every major conflict of the last century?
I think it's hugely significant because, I mean, there's no better measure, there's no stronger measure of our commitment to each other than the fact that we've made the ultimate sacrifice.
So when you look back at history and the build-up to World War I, World War II, what lessons can we learn to avoid catastrophic circumstances like that again?
That's a terrific question. So there's a, I think it was Mark Twain who said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And if it's not Mark Twain, it ought to be Mark Twain. In any case, the lessons of World War I and World War II are profound, but they offer different lessons. World War I teaches us the dangers of escalation and the very real costs of war. And I think there's no more significant, poignant reminder of that than the architecture of Canberra. You have the new Parliament building overlooking the old Parliament building, looking directly at the war memorial. And I think that was purpose-built to remind us of the costs of war. The lessons from World War II are that democracies need to stand stalwart, side by side, shoulder to shoulder, in the face of tyranny, in the face of threats to things that we hold dear. And I think in both conflicts, the United States and Australia did stand together, and I'm confident that we'll stand together, you know, cognizant of these lessons as we face challenges in the future.
When it comes to the nature of the challenges that lie ahead, the Biden administration has made its position quite clear.
President Biden's Director of Intelligence describes China's push for global power as the biggest threat facing the world today. How big is that threat in your view?
Oh, I think it's real, it's significant, it's the taken together, it's the dominant challenge of the next several decades. I mean, that said, I have every confidence that it's a challenge that we'll be able to meet together with our allies. I think Secretary Blinken put it well when he said, we'll cooperate with China in areas where it's possible, we'll compete with China in areas where it's necessary, and we'll have an adversarial relationship where we have no choice. He put it better than that, but that's the essence of it.
In Washington, Republican Congressman Mike Gallagher, who co-chairs the Friends of Australia caucus, is less diplomatic.
I think it's the most serious challenge facing the world today. I think we're waking up, in part due to Australia's experience, in part due to the economic coercion we've seen the Chinese Communist Party wield against Australia when your government had the temerity to suggest we needed an investigation into the origins of coronavirus. And that's been a wake-up for the whole world. And now it's time for the free world to band together and figure out how we're going to defend basic Western values. So I think this will be the challenge of our lifetime. And again, I think we're at the front end, not the back end.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Last month, our Foreign Minister Maurice Payne held a joint press conference in Washington with Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. The message to Beijing was simple.
The United States will not leave Australia alone on the field, or maybe I should say alone on the pitch, in the face of economic coercion by China. That's what allies do. We have each other's backs, so we can face threats and challenges from a position of collective strength.
We've had very good engagement with the United States, and certainly my visit to Washington last month also with a full opportunity right across the administration to engage on these key issues has really reinforced those shared interests. What the United States has indicated is their strong commitment to engage and to advocate on the important values that bring us to the table together, the indispensable alliance between the US and Australia. We've heard very strong messages from the US, and we certainly welcome those.
I think the new administration has had a major impact. In terms of the alliance, I think what is different is that the administration's been a lot more forthcoming about the focus it puts on allies and partners. They see it as one of the great advantages that the US has, this network of alliances and partners. And so that's an important thing, which is not just in the rhetoric, but in the practice. And what I mean by that is in the run-up, for example, to the discussions between the Americans and the Chinese, there was a lot of groundwork done with allies and partners, with us, with Japan and with Korea, for example. The first foreign trips by the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defence were to Japan and Korea. And that was all laying the groundwork. And then, of course, having the Quad meeting occur between Australia, Japan, India and the US at the leaders' level.
One of the first things Biden did as president was open up a dialogue with the so-called Quad group of nations to help maintain a rules-based international order.
President Biden, Prime Minister Morrison and Prime Minister Suga, it is good to be among the friends.
Is that an attempt to contain China?
No, I'd say it's not. It's not a sort of NATO for East Asia. Let me tell you what I love about the Quad. It's difficult to envision four countries that are fundamentally as different as the constituent members of the Quad. You know, different in terms of their geography, in terms of their demography, in terms of their economic disposition. They're very different societies, and yet they're bound by a common reverence for democratic principles and the rule of law.
If it's not an attempt to contain, does it balance China?
I mean, I think international politics is all about finding the proper balance. So in that sense, sure, but it's not a formal alliance in the way that NATO is. It's not set out to counter China. To the extent that China is willing to participate in these endeavors, sure, we would welcome China as a partner in fostering a rules-based international order. To the extent that they stand in the way of a rules-based international order, then it's incumbent on democracies and like-minded countries to sort of get on with it and show that democracy can deliver to our peoples and to the international community.
The Biden administration's approach has been welcomed by both Democrats and Republicans.
Well, I think it's probably our best tool in the competition with China. There simply is no winning that competition without drawing closer to longstanding allies like Australia and Japan, as well as non-aligned partners such as India. India in particular, I think, is a very important piece of the puzzle. And the fact is we have a lot of common interests that we could expand upon. Energy cooperation, for example, I think is an area where we've only begun to scratch the surface. I think the incoming administration was smart to prioritize the Quad meeting prior to their Alaska summit with the CCP. I sort of view Five Eyes and the Quad as the foundations for any successful allied effort to push back against growing CCP aggression.